In this tutorial we're going to have a little look at organising a few custom defaults within the interface, as well as customising the default presets within your plugins. So to start with, I'm going to recap over this. I've done this in a previous video, but we're going to have a look at customising the LCD display up here. So by default it usually goes in beats and project, or bars and beats, that kind of stuff. It's not particularly handy. We don't have a time reference in there. We can't see some of the other useful things that are in this custom section. So I'm going to click on that, and this adds in some much more useful features in here. Now if I control click on this bar here, I can go customize control bar and display. So on the LCD display I can choose what I have in here, including things like your performance meters, any MIDI activity that's going on there, and you can also do it for these sections just to the right and also to the left here. So I've included capture recording as well. That's for if you've been playing in loop but you haven't hit record, you can then go back and retrospectively capture any kind of MIDI recordings, etc., stuff like that. Now on the right hand side, the mode and functions, this is one that has some kind of irritating defaults. I've kind of gone over this master fader and how it's kind of spawn of the devil, so we get rid of that straight away, and I'll get rid of replace and auto punch because I personally don't particularly use those features, but I do use pre-fader metering when I looked at that in the gain stage video. So once you've got that in there, you can go save as default, and that means every time you start a new project, the whole of this top control bar here will look exactly like that every time, and you don't need to go back over and do this every single time on every single project. And we can do this on the plugins themselves as well. So for example, the defaults that Logic comes up with the high pass filter and the low pass filter, it has them switched off by default, but it doesn't really have them at usable values. So personally, it's annoying these days, you have to switch it on to then activate that panel. I tend to always have my high pass filter at about 100 Hz switched off, and my low pass filter I have at about 15k, and again I'll switch that off. I might even change the slope. I have to switch it back on to change the slope now, and change that, maybe make that 18 dB, maybe even 12. Maybe I'll start with 18 as a kind of default thing. I'll turn that off, and then again I'll go save as default. So next time, let's go, yep, replace the default setting, so that next time I load up a plugin, let's go to the snare for example, and I load that up, you can see that 100 Hz is where that high pass filter center frequency starts, and that the slope is 18 dB. You can see the same thing up at the other end, that it's now set to a 15k low pass filter at 18 dB per octave roll off as well. And I'll just do one more example of this. So here's the default settings for this overdrive plugin. Now I have a kind of go-to mix move, and this is only really useful in circumstances where you commonly apply the same characteristics again and again and again. So this overdrive plugin has got a really nice kind of saturation, harmonic exciter kind of feel with those distortions that it has. It's kind of like a soft clipper really with this overdrive. It's a very kind of subtle one that adds a bit of bite and a bit of brightness. And I tend to find that 6 dB overdrive, I take the output down because the level compensation doesn't always work 100%, but I do have that on as well, and I have the tone fully up, so it's just really working as a saturator rather than an overdrive where you might want to remove some of those high frequencies. So I have that as a very common mix move, so I'm going to save that as default so that every time I load up this plugin it's already got those settings on there, and I don't need to go in every time and do that. Now there's going to be loads of plugins where that's going to be really useful, and a load where it's not particularly useful. So I'd only really recommend saving some defaults for really common mix moves that you do. So most EQ things, if we go back to that kick drum example, even though I might have boost the low end of the kick, maybe do something like that. Let's just solo that a sec. So I might on this occasion put that in there, or I might want to go an octave up from that fundamental at around 80 Hz, something like that, and add a bit of beef to the low end. It's not going to be a common enough mix move. The the fundamental frequency of my kick is going to change on track to track, so it's not worth putting that in there as a default. Also, if I'm not working on a kick drum, etc., then it's not going to be particularly useful. But if I did find a common pattern here, and I always had a fundamental and a first sort of a second harmonic in a particular place that I wanted to do a common boost with, it would make more sense there to save it as a preset. So save it as, and put it in your user presets there, rather than have it be the default thing that comes up each time. And that's all I want to show you in this tutorial.